I think for me, the call to the priesthood started when I was altar serving back in elementary school, assisting the priest and really wanting to know more about what it was that he did. And going through middle school and high school, I heard a lot of people even invite me, hey, have you ever thought about being a priest? Have you ever thought about this life? And at first, I dismissed it completely. I ignored the call. I had no desire to be a priest. And I said, no, I want to have a wife. I want to have family. I want to have a good paying career in medicine. Graduated from Grand Valley, and I was working in a local hospital as a rapid response transporter. And we were moving a patient from the emergency room to the operating room. And it was 2:00 in the morning, and she was dying, and she needed to get into the OR. And she grabs my wrist, and she says, I need to see a priest. And I said, ma'am, there is no priest. It's 2:00 in the morning. I'm sorry, you need to get into surgery. But she wouldn't let go of my wrist. I prayed with her, and she was able to get through surgery. Fast forward a couple of years, just a little gnawing feeling in the back of my mind about this call, because I had not really been satisfied with the work I've been doing in life. So I stopped to fill up for gas, and I see a kid across the way filling up, and he's staring at me. It's making me really uncomfortable. And he asked me this question. He's like, do you work at the hospital? And I said, I did. And he's like, you probably don't remember this, but you helped my grandma get through surgery a couple of years ago. And because of that, I came back to my faith the following year and brought my parents back into the faith the year after that. And then he walked away. And I was left there at a gas station at 7:00 in the morning in my car crying, because I knew at that point I had shut the door on the idea of the priesthood so many times that this time God just took the hinges right off the door and said, what do you have to lose?
So I grew up in St. Peter and Mount Clemens, and kind of always involved in the church growing up. My parents were very active in the church. I was an altar server. My mom helped with the altar servers. My dad was in the Knights of Columbus. So really grew up around the church and had a lot of people who always asked me if I'd thought about the priesthood. And I never really considered it. I always wanted to have a family. And it was during adoration that I heard God ask the question of whether I should be a priest. And I started evasive maneuvers, tried to think of anything else during that period of adoration, and really couldn't get away from that question. And really for the next month, just kind of sat with it on my own and found I couldn't really think of anything else. Starting to look at the vocations paid website. Once I started letting people in, telling people what I was thinking about, there was not a level of surprise like I thought there might be. In fact, it seemed to be the exact opposite. It was people were like, oh good, you finally figured it out. You finally see what we've seen all these years. And how the Lord uses other people to confirm what he's doing in our lives. That we're not just discerning in a vacuum or even just between me and God, but that it really is a discernment of the whole community.
I was praying pretty intentionally, asking the Lord for about 2 years, the first 2 years of high school. A discernment has to come from a place of peace. It can't come from a place of fear. And so if you're feeling afraid, if you're contemplating the call or that you might be a priest and that's making you feel afraid, then you can pretty much rule out that this is the moment when you're going to make the decision. But I was at this youth group meeting, and we were doing praise and worship together as a youth group, and I found a great sense of peace came over me. I realized in my mind, I have everything I need right now if I want to say yes to this. And it was incredible. It was a remarkable thing to just sort of make that realization. This right now is the Lord's invitation. And so I kind of took myself away from everyone, and I paused, and after a few minutes, it just came out. The yes came out, and I almost hardly remember the second of saying this, but I remember the second after saying, I can't believe that just happened. I can't believe I just did that, but I knew it was real. And immediately, even more peace flooded in, even more joy flooded in. I knew that the Lord was pleased with my yes, I knew that he was blessing it. I knew that he was blessing my future. I did have some reservations, especially as I got older and matured more. I did more and more want to be married. I did more and more want to have a family. But I think my whole journey up until this very moment could be described as God making good on the trust that I placed in him and changing me more and more so that this is exactly what I want to do with my life. And it's been wonderful for me to behold the Lord's fidelity.
I'd like to be a priest that's both faithful and forgotten, and to be faithful in the daily work of getting up every day and ministering to the people of God and walking with people, but also to be forgettable, so that after I meet with somebody one-on-one or I administer the sacraments in any way, that they don't necessarily remember me in the interaction, but that Christ comes to them and they remember that encounter.
In chapter 34 of the book of Ezekiel, he says that there are many shepherds who are feeding themselves and they are not feeding the sheep. But the shepherds are supposed to feed the sheep. I want to be a shepherd that feeds the sheep and doesn't feed himself.
That's how I would want to be remembered, is as this priest that is always there for his people, the father that shows up. And I think of my own dad. As a kid, didn't realize, the sacrifices that it would take on his part to make sure he was always there, because he never made it seem like a burden. And that would, I think, be my goal as a priest, is to be known as the priest who's always there.
If a young man feels that something's been put in his heart and he's thinking about it and discerning it, I would say probably the most important thing is don't hyper-focus on the call. The call to the priesthood is a word that the Lord speaks in friendship. And so to hear the call, just focus on becoming friends with the Lord.
Don't be afraid to take the next step, whatever that step is, because everyone is at a different place in their discernment. So whether it's even just talking to a close friend or talking to your pastor, coming on a discernment weekend. Before I entered seminary, there was something off. There was a discontent there. And it was only once I surrendered my plans and said, okay, Lord, I'll take this step, that discontent went away. And I realized, okay, this is the piece that was missing, even though I couldn't see it.
There's a lot out in the world that says this is not a life that's happy. This is not a life that can be fulfilling. But for me, even the worst day, when I go to bed at night and I say this day has been absolutely horrible, I go to bed that night thinking there's no other life for me. I'm still happy, even in the midst of that suffering or that trial. I want nothing else in life but to be his priest. And God willing, that'll happen.